All right. So my first question was about like what zero preparation activities do you guys have, and what like what would you like to share, or maybe you have some comments about the activities that we were mentioning, like in the video.
I can start sharing until people gain confidence to speak, if that's okay.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Happy. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Heidi.
So let me have an example of no preparation activity or really minimal. With the help of newspapers, I find them very, very useful. I have the privilege to teach in London, so I have access to newspapers written in English, and these are amazing because we can use them with low-level students, for instance, beginners or elementary level students, where you have one copy of the same newspaper to every single student, and you ask them to have a look at all the pages or of the newspaper and choose one image that they like and describe it to the class, making sure that they do not reveal where it is in the newspaper, and the others need to find that exact image very quickly in the newspaper.
Mm.
And obviously, first we demonstrate these tasks to the students, and then we can use newspapers with higher level students as well, where instead of asking them to describe images, which is also possible, giving more details, but we can also ask them to find relatively short or long articles and read them very quickly and summarize them to the class. And based on the summary, the rest of the class needs to locate the article and shout out the page number. And newspapers can also be used in exam classes, for instance, when we teach, let's say, prepare students for IELTS exams. They are very good to use, for instance, to practice paraphrasing tasks. And again, we choose an article, paraphrase that, and based on that, we need to try and find which article it is exactly. So this is just an example using the same material with really no or minimum preparation.
Yeah. So if you have authentic materials, so it's not that difficult to incorporate them in the class if you know how. Right. So this is like, because that's why we combined, I think that's why we combined these two workshops together, because the first one was about like how to exploit materials, and the second is teaching with zero prep materials, right? So this particular workshop is more about how to save your time, and how to help you to create this emergency kit. So emergency materials that you can use in case something goes wrong in the classroom, right? And we have like, I have a question, Heidi, uh, about what you do with the newspaper. So when the students are reading the newspaper, finding the image, right, and then they describe this image, that's like, I mean, that's quite clear, right? So that's easy to spot for them, so they may use some vocabulary. But what about like when they summarize, especially when you're saying that they're lower level, so they summarize the article, and then they like other students need to find this article. How are they coping with it? Is it easy for them? Is it challenging? Because I think it might be very challenging for them, you know.
I use describing images with lower level students, and reading and summarizing articles with higher level students. So I make sure that it's not too challenging for them, something that they can cope with. You know, so let's say intermediate, upper intermediate level students, or even with students who are preparing for exams.
Okay. And we have some questions here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just to make it easier. I often give them a page limit. Let's say I ask them to try and find an article between pages 1 and
Ah,
16.
right. Okay. Yes. Hmm. I do remember, so that what works very well with, especially with newspapers or any authentic materials, when you prepare students with for exams, is when you ask the students. I always ask the students to do my job actually, so to ask the students to create an exam material based on this particular article, and they actually create their own tasks on paraphrasing, or they use Tipex to cover some gaps. So they prepared like gap fill activities or something like that, or multiple choice. So they are familiar. They're getting familiar with the exam type tasks, and they're creating their own materials based on authentic materials, and it's actually works very well. And they have a better awareness of what the exam is like.
Mm.
Yes.
I wonder if others attending this webinar at the moment, if they use newspapers, and if yes, then how? If they could share their experience
Ideas, yes, that would be so like great.
with us.
Hmm.
You
We
can
have,
raise your hand or
oh yes, somebody did.
write in the chat as well. Maria, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I can see Maria has something to share.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, hello. Good afternoon. Yes, I use authentic materials with my students, newspapers, but then, of course, I just select, of course, the material according to the level, you know. So, for example, with younger students, and then if it happens, for example, which is an activity related to a lesson, which to do with housing, for example. And we've just covered vocabulary about houses and accommodation. Then we just pick up, say, adverts,
For
state
rent.
state agents, adverts in the newspaper, or go to a website, where
Hmm.
find the information, and then just kind of like choose the flat, choose their ideal flat, or just explain to the class which flat they've chosen. If it's in a printed, if it's a newspaper, of course, if it's printed, then of course, I mean, they will just see the pages, and then they will just go through, the different adverts. Sometimes, there would be, for example, when there are landlords, or people who want somebody to share a flat with, and there would be, so for example, the acronyms like just as sense of humor. So they will not understand that. They will say, well, what's that? Very often you have to clarify what does it mean, or if there is CH, what is CH, bits and pieces, and then of course then you can extend the vocabulary. So that would be with lower level students.
Hmm.
With more advanced students, of course, that would depend a lot on what's happened in the news. And then also, I mean, if I happen to know if I'm covering for a teacher, that's a little bit more complicated, because you don't have time you don't know much about the students.
Yeah.
But if it's a group of students that I've had with me for a while, then I can easily just choose, like, for example, a selection, a topic. And then if the people are interested in football, and I say football because it just seems that everybody seems to be, well, not everybody, but even
A lot
those
of people.
who are not interested will be willing to contribute.
Hmm.
So I just pick up different articles from different newspapers, make them compare. Uh, if it's, for example, some news like gossipy news, it's a very, very good thing is just to choose different articles from different tabloids, from different newspapers, and then just make them select, and try to make them work out, what type of newspaper the article comes from, if it's a conservative newspaper, where it's more left wing or more central, or where it's what you call um, you know um, not as scandalous, but we'll say I won't name them the newspapers really,
Mhm.
but just see, according to their own experiences, how would they classify them. But again, of course, I'm talking about students with with a high level of English, and
Yeah.
a lot of vocabulary. But classes can be, a class can be quite entertaining, and then make them produce their own article about some news that they have read about their own country, so something that has happened in their own country, and then just report it back to the classroom
Mhm.
using, of course, the structure, that the structure we've seen. Also, I mean, it's easier to point out the kind of structure that we use in a newspaper, in an article, in a newspaper article. Sometimes you just pick up the weather forecast, so some newspapers, they have very good weather forecasts and printed at the back, and then the students can really then make up their own weather forecast. In order to do that, perhaps this activity about the weather forecast can be done with not necessarily with high level students, but with so more like an intermediate,
Mhm.
intermediate, and design a map or an imaginary map, or even use a map of their own countries. So just draw a map of their own country, and if it's Germany, so they can just play up and put suns and clouds and whatever they want, so I mean, I think there are quite a lot of activities you can use using authentic materials, but for more advanced levels, I mean, for beginners, I think we have to restrict ourselves to, well, games and activities we already know, with different variations,
I agree. Yes, I agree. And there's actually a question and Q&A sessions here. So in section here, so is it possible to run no prep activities at really low levels, at beginners level? I just wanted to clarify. So um, no prep activities means that you didn't prepare for them because you know them inside out and you know how to use them, right?
Mhm.
But it's like you can use like games, vocabulary games or vocabulary activities with low levels as well. With beginners, and there's another question. Um, it's like, yes, all the activities suggested so far have their focus on recycling vocabulary that has already been learned by the students, or words generated by the students. Is it possible to at all to run a no prep activity with a focus on teaching new lexes? Um, if, well,
we can ask Gabi. I can see that Gabi posted this
yes,
question. If
yes,
she has something to
yes,
add.
maybe we can ask Gabi.
Okay, so what I really want to say is that I've been listening to you guys and Maria as well, and I'm thinking, I feel like we are talking about two slightly different things here. Okay, so I feel like there are two types of no prep activities that we are discussing. Let me just clarify. So there are activities who I'd simply call fillers, okay? Or if I have 10 minutes left at the end of the lesson, then I have this activity, which is a no prep activity, right?
Mhm.
Emergency activities.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that these activities are obviously, the material is student generated, and they focus exclusively on recycling the language that students have already learned, right? So very short activities, 10, 15 minutes. We generate the language from the students. These activities are typically games, and there's only one purpose to them, to make sure that there is no dead time in the lesson, right? And to make sure that students recycle language.
Yeah, it's
So
like controlled practice activities, yeah, or semi-controlled.
Yeah, not quite really, because if you generate this language from students, how is it controlled? It's not really. Students produce the words. Even that activity with word slips, I mean, students
Mm-hmm.
produce the words, students ask questions, they can ask any questions, so it's not exactly controlled, but the main point is that it's recycling the language they've already learned. Okay, so this is, and I feel like this is the one type of no prep activities that we have been discussing here. But then I feel like at some point you were discussing no prep lessons, not as much activities as lessons, which, if you have a no prep full blown lesson, that's a different story. It was, Hedy, what you were saying about newspapers, right? You could, if this is no prep and you have a full blown lesson, uh, then what happens is you don't really recycle vocabulary, you teach new vocabulary. Um, Through paraphrasing or getting students to paraphrase the language. So it's almost like TBL a little bit. But my point is, there are two types of activities, okay? I mean, I may be wrong because I'm just thinking on my feet, okay? I'm listening to you and thinking on my feet. So one type, which is purely to recycle language, which is typically games, short activities, fillers, activities that you use at the beginning or at the end of the lesson. And another type of activities, which essentially is a full-blown lesson. Okay, so you have one task, one activity, and you don't do any preparation before the lesson, and then you develop this one activity into a full-blown lesson. Again, like your example, with the slips, like 3 stages, this could be a full-blown lesson. But then I can see a little bit of a problem with this, because it sounds a bit like the dogma methodology. But with the dogma methodology, there is an issue with new teachers, because obviously new teachers are not quite prepared to give feedback on activities if there is no target language or if the target language is unpredictable, because you don't know how the lesson is going to unfold. I don't know if I'm making myself clear again, because
I understand what you mean, Gabby. So I think there are two different things though. So what we talked about, like in the video, for example. So yes, you're absolutely right. So this is the recycled, this is for the purpose of recycling, right? Recycling the language and how to, like, if you have like 5 minutes at the beginning of the lesson, 5 minutes at the end, even in the middle of the lessons, you can fill it in. It's like filler or motivator. While what Heidi was saying, I think I look at it as more like it's not a zero prep activity. It's the way you exploit the materials. It's the way you use authentic materials in class. And I doubt that Heidi walks in class unprepared with the newspaper. I think so. She has a very clear plan in her mind what she wants to do with this newspaper. It's like, and the reason why she does it is because that she knows exactly what to achieve and what to do.
But how can you? Because there's an element of unpredictability here. Because obviously you have your materials, you have your newspapers, you have no idea what your students are going to pick, and you have no idea what language they are going to produce when describing the pictures or paraphrasing articles.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, it's not like you know exactly where you are going, because there is no knowing. And unless you have years and years of experience, you are not
That's true,
able
yes.
to manipulate your students into producing a particular structure, right? Because it's very difficult to actually do dogma in the classroom. It's extremely difficult.
It is
So
difficult, yes.
yeah, so yeah, I don't. But then again, so you can't really prepare. So this is a no prep lesson in a sense.
I wouldn't say so. Like
You
when
wouldn't
how
say that.
well Heidi, when you bring materials to class, you look through you look through the articles, right? And Maria, I'm sure you do the same. You look through the newspaper articles, and it's not just like you know exactly what to like which article. Maybe even when you say so, look through pages 1 to 3. Yes.
Mm.
So you just
I mean,
limit them somehow.
yeah, I have to say, perhaps it's just me being a little bit biased because I've always been a little bit wary of no prep activities. Like I always felt, I mean, what is the difference between no prep activities and games? I can't see a clear cut difference because no prep activities are effectively games because the point is that they should be kind of adaptable to any level. So if you have a game, then you bring this game into the classroom at any level and you just rely on the language that students already have. So what's the difference between a game and a no prep activity? So that's why, I mean, I've always had a little bit of an issue with no prep activities. I'm not saying no prep activities are not helpful and useful because it's good to have kind of activities in your back pocket, right? Ready to use when you need to kill 15 minutes, okay, of in your lesson because you've just covered whatever materials you had prepared for the students and there is nothing else to do. So you have this game. But then it's effectively a game. So you have a selection of games, you know how to play those games, and then this is adaptable to any level. So you go to your elementary level class, to your advanced level class, you use the same game, but students generate different language, level appropriate language. And that's a no prep activity to me. I mean, but then maybe I'm just simplifying it.
Well, I think in a way, and there's nothing wrong in using games in your lessons.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that there's something wrong. No. I'm just saying, I'm just saying, what is the difference between a game and a no prep activity?
Well, some games can be some games can be really complicated. So let's put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need to know like zero prep activity is is the activity that you know that will help the students to have some language value, will help you in some like at some stages of the lesson when something doesn't work,
Yeah.
and that's it. Well,
Yeah.
sometimes like yes, if you're talking about like fully blown class out of this article, right?
Dogma.
So like
Oh, yeah.
if we're talking about dogma, it's extremely difficult for newly qualified teachers because you need to know what
Yeah.
to do with emergent language, and not everybody like has this like these skills to
Well,
like to
yeah,
work
that's
with
the
it
point.
and how to.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
like that's why in this like so I look at it as the way, so the way you work with authentic materials, I just look at this as the way how to exploit material, how to make the most out of the text, for example, or of the listening text, of the reading text, or if you're talking about newspapers, right?
Yeah.
But if you're talking about like zero prep activities, yes, they're emergency kit for you just to save you during the lesson.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
it's helpful for the learners. It's helpful for the teachers to have as well, because sometimes if something doesn't work and like you just play any game, not necessarily it will work. So the students need to see the language value behind the game,
mm,
because like sometimes they can walk back and like so they can get out of the classroom and say, "Oh, we've been playing all the games and that's all."
Yeah,
So
well, that's
they should be very clearly, like, either stated by you or stated at the end of the lesson. Okay, look how many words we've reviewed. So
yeah.
look, so like this is the structure you now are using it much
Yes,
faster.
I mean, I absolutely agree with that, because if you are not explicit about what students have actually gained from this activity, then this is going to be lost on them. So it's very important that you make it explicit, right? But then you see, you just brought it up. I mean, because I was about to ask another question, and it's kind of, you just said it yourself. Like, what is I mean, where is the? It's a. Oh, let me put it in a different way.
It's a
There is a
fine line.
fine line between winging a lesson and running no prep activities, because quite a few teachers think that lessons should be fun. So based on games, there's no clear language value and language element to the lesson, but it's fun, right? And it's no prep activities, it's just games. So you kind of, I mean, we have to be very careful with no prep activities, because unless we clearly define the aim of each activity,
Exactly, I
it's
agree.
going to be winging it in the classroom, the case of winging it.
Yeah, this is the language value that Olga has been talking about, and this actually reminds me of my experience as a high school student. I was specialized in English, and we had the privilege to have native English speakers to teach us once a week. We had 45-minute lessons with them, and we had a different person every year, and it was so interesting to see that, we had a lot of laughs, um, and but I didn't really understand what was happening in the lesson. We played one game after the other, and we had a great time, laughed a lot, but I just didn't understand what the reason behind these activities
Yeah, maybe there
was.
was no reason. Maybe it was just winging it. So this is, I guess, that this is the moment when we just have to emphasize that no prep activities are not just activities for the sake of running an activity, right? Because even a no prep activity has a very clear objective and goal, and it has to be spelled out to your students. It's what Olga said earlier, that you kind of tell your students, or you elicit what they've learned from this activity, because if they can't see this learning value, it's time wasted.
Yes, it also depends on how long you run these activities in the lesson, really. So, but we cannot, on the other hand, we cannot say that because you use minimum or zero prep materials, you are a lazy teacher. We need these backup materials in case we need to cover a lesson and we have 2 minutes, till the lesson starts, for instance. So, but I agree that when we teach our regular students, then we really need to think about the use and
Yeah,
the length of these
yeah.
materials.
I think Maria is actually confirming what we are just discussing.
Yes,
So,
and
or kind of elaborating on what she said, that yes, I mean, and she agrees with what Olga said, that using newspapers is not just taking the newspaper and walking into the classroom,
no,
but you, in a sense, get prepared for this lesson.
exactly.
Yeah,
You are
Let me
student,
just let
and
me tell you a story, like just one more thing, just a quick thing. So when I, like, there was one situation when I used this, not one situation, but like once I used this zero prep activity in a classroom because I knew exactly why I needed it. So I had a class of adults, and they were like in evening classes, and like we had listening planned, and they were strong adults, upper intermediates, and we did the listening and they just couldn't get it. So they just couldn't get all the answers. They said, because they look so tired, they were so tired. And we did. I said, okay, so let's put it aside. Let's do change pairs activity. So like you probably know, it's like when the students are sitting in a circle, and like one student standing like in front, like in the middle of the circle, and say, those who have like those who are wearing glasses, switch your places. So those people who are wearing glasses needs to stand up and switch places. It's a lot of fun. It's very physical, so activity. So we did it for about like 3 or 4 minutes, then we just like get back to our seats, and they did the listening, and this time they did it much better, because the physical activity helps with the brain activity. Actually, it helps the blood move around, and somehow like that's how it helped them actually with the lessons. Oh, really nice. Then now we understand why we're doing it. Okay. So, and it's always like, it's helpful to have this set of, like, if you know exactly why you're doing it and what for. So it may save you, like it may help your learners, it may help you as a teacher. So I agree. I think so, but I do believe that, like, when you walk in the classroom with no preparation, it's completely different thing. Being unprepared for your lesson and using like zero prep activities. Zero prep activities is for you just to help you, like as Heidi was saying. So it's like a backpack for us, you know. With
But
activity.
do you feel that zero prep activities require a bit more confidence from the teacher? Like, say, I mean, I don't think I would be able or I have the courage to do zero prep activities as a new teacher. I just feel like, maybe because I'm a control freak and I need to have everything planned, I'd feel like this is a territory where I may not know what to say and how to react if it's a zero prep activity. So
I think Abby, it's especially for control freaks. I think it will work perfectly well, because in this case you write a very good lesson plan, and then at the end of the lesson plan you say, if it doesn't work, I will do this and this and this. Or if I have 5 minutes at the end of the lesson, I will do this. And in this case, you can do this like zero prep activity. It's not that you're not prepared, you're aware of this activity, you know how they work, and you know them inside out. So that's the point of using them.
Hi, very interesting with this zero preparation, and I was going to ask you a question, but anyway, I've just come across the scenarios and situations with younger students and with mature students, when you have to cover for them, and sometimes if it's in the afternoon after they had lessons in the morning, and then in the afternoon they tend to be all very tired. Mature students tend to, I mean, they love talking, they love practicing the language what they're learning. But when you're thrown into the class because the other teacher can't be there, they are very curious about you and they want to ask you all sorts of questions. I must say, I must admit, I don't want to talk about my life or my um, personal life with my students. I mean, I'm friendly, but I just draw a line. And very often, you know, the mature students I've got, they are people who are married. They've had families, or they have families. They are doing the course, a 2-week course to improve their English. And of course, it's not that I want to know a lot about them, because it's, you know, you can't learn a lot from your students in you know, when you're covering. But I play a trick, and I just look at their hands and see how many of them have rings, not necessarily wedding rings. I mean, if they are women, they will wear different rings. If they are men, they may have a wedding ring. Some men may have earrings as well. It depends how modern they are. Or they have a watch. And everybody has a watch. But I start with a question is, pose that question. Every ring tells a story. And then, of course, everybody, I mean, women especially, would look at their rings. If they are men and are wearing wedding rings, then they will, well, they don't know what you are getting to, you know. If it's somebody if it's a man who wears an earring, then of course that's another ring. And then also say, and every watch has a story. And then when it starts, then I give them an example. then I give them an example of one of the rings I'm wearing. So, and I give them a little story about that ring, the story of the ring. So what they have to do, they have to think and they have to assemble their own individual vocabulary, because every ring will have a different story. And they all come out with a lovely, they're given, say, 2 minutes to speak. I mean, three, not more than that. If they have problems with the vocabulary, then I'll help them with the vocabulary, of course. But I mean, they do their little presentation, and of course, the rest of the class, they get to know each other even better, and I get away with it. And this is quite a good activity to do when you are totally unprepared. Your students, they don't really want to concentrate too much on a written article, and they want to talk. So that works quite well. So they can invent a story, or they can tell you, the story of the ring.
Yeah. I think that's a great activity. Yes, and it's also personalized.
Well,
When it
yes.
involves the students, it's personalized. It develops their speaking, and you can see and you can help them while they're preparing with this language. A lot of new words can come out, and you can work with the words later on, right?
The thing is that then, you get those students who want to know more about the other person, and then the question may be, oh, when did you get married, or how old were you? And then it's up to them, because what happens, the students in the class, they have their own complicity, and they know each other better. I mean, I'm just the outsider who's just there to to entertain them a little bit. I wanted to ask you as well, if you ever come across with a disruptive class that you had to cover, and with teenagers, of course, because with teenagers, that's the problem. And how do you deal with a disruptive class that perhaps you've prepared something, and because they have a new teacher, they don't want you to be there, because they get very attached, especially younger teenagers, they get very attached to the teachers, and they kind of reject you.
Mhm.
So I've just come across situations in which I had to change my plan for another plan, and try to make everybody, try to engage everybody, and make the lesson lighter, because I could feel, there was going to be a mutiny there. So I mean, I wonder whether anyone has any ideas, uh, so about that. I mean, I just have different strategies as well I've used, but I would like to hear some other
Yeah,
participants.
I think Gabby has a similar situation. She has been in similar
Yeah,
situations.
I mean, this is Maria. This is just classic, right? I mean, it's just something that I'm sure that every single teacher has experienced. Because the problem is that when students get used to a particular way of teaching, right, to a particular face, in particular, if they like the way of teaching, if they like the face, if they like the teacher, they just don't want any changes, right? You can't take it personally. I mean, this is what I have always been saying to teachers all my life. Don't ever listen to your students when they flatter you, when they say you are the best teacher in the world, because surely you are not. There is no such concept as the best teacher in the world. So don't ever buy this from your students. Acknowledge it, but don't ever think you are the best. But then it works both ways. Don't ever make students believe that you are not a good teacher, because, well, some teachers are not good teachers, but don't you kind of have to be immune to this, and you have to take it one day at a time, and um, it'll grow on your students. You will grow on your students. They will get used to your way of teaching. If you are explicit about what they are learning, if you are friendly, if you don't lose your patience, there is no way students will not like you eventually. So the transition period is very often difficult, right? But that's how it is. I mean, we have all been there and we've all experienced this, unless I'm wrong. But I believe that every single teacher has been in a situation where, um, the teacher before them was supposedly, seemingly the best teacher in the world.
I agree with you, Gabby. So
You
yeah,
agree with me that you should never ever listen to your students when they say you are the best?
listen, but don't believe everything. I think believing that I am the best is so limiting, because when I think I'm the best, I do not leave space for getting better. So
Yeah.
that's the limit, and I stay there. So um, and what I do is I try and do not effort, and because I try and be myself, because that's all I have to give to people. And yeah, it's just that transition period. Once they can see the learning value, that we have to offer, that they make progress, then they accept you
Yeah,
and
I
they
mean,
also like you.
this is just the truth of life, right? I mean, and old habits die hard. So it's not easy to accept, to embrace something that's new. And it's like that with students as well. And it's not easy to let go of someone you really like, right? So if you like your teacher, then you feel like this is the person who's going to teach you until the end of the world. But it's not good for students to be exposed to just one teacher. It doesn't matter how much they like the person, right? So yeah, I mean, it's only natural, I think,
We
this
all
reaction.
have something to offer as teachers. So
Mm.
yeah, and students will, just accept who they have, and just live with that for a while.
Yeah.
Mm. Uh, I'm just
Yeah,
reading
it's the
Maria's
teachers
comment.
that don't want a new teacher and want to stick to the old one. So Marie is saying, yes, that's true, because adults do not mind like switching the teachers, right?
And Maria, you have mentioned that you have some strategy or strategies.
Yeah, with the younger ones, with the little ones, it's I mean, it's just that things come to my mind. Uh, Times that you just get into the class, you have this group of 12, 14 uh, students, 12, 13 years old, and they well, it's not that they refuse to be taught. It's just that they want they want to do something different. They don't want to stick to any norms that day. And we have this issue with with food. I mean, students come from different parts of Europe, uh, often from the Arab world as well. And there is usually usual big complaint about the packed lunches. Packed lunches can be horrendous. So I remember once I just got into the class and I thought, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do with that lot. So I said, okay, everybody gets out the packed lunch, and I want to see what you are eating, and you have to tell me. And then, I mean, it was a good thing because they all got it out, and then they start comparing with the other students in the class we're having. So out of that, we just managed to incorporate new vocabulary, because uh, what they had in the lunchbox, they most of them didn't like it. Apart from the Kit Kats and the piece of fruit, the rest was something that to them, of course, I mean, the cultural differences are important.
So this
And
was a no prep activity,
That's
Maria.
exactly what I wanted to say.
yeah,
It's
that was
like natural reaction to reality,
yeah. So just use the reality, and then after that, okay, it was we reached an agreement, and then of course they just had to write down what was it they would like for packed lunches, and then they had to discuss that with their host family, which was a good thing. And then we just got a policy in the school after that, which was okay, just make sure that their families would listen to the children needs, and the taste as well. I mean, not to change it completely, but try to accommodate the students' needs to, you know, when it came to food. But anyway, that was quite fun, and it was quite a good lesson. But it doesn't happen all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, if I may add, I saw your comment about teenager are the one that who don't want to change new teacher and would prefer their old teacher. That's
Yes.
actually from my experience. It was the other way around. It's actually quite interesting because the time that when I experienced the difficulty with adult student, it's always the adult student who would say, "Oh, I want my old teacher back. I don't want to move the level. Can I not stay in the same level?"
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Where's the teenager? Because teenager they are mostly coming for shorter period for 2-3 weeks as a holiday. So
Yeah.
they were more flexible in a way that they they don't mind who is the teacher as
Mhm.
long as it was fun. So even if maybe there were some cases that there might be two teachers that who are teaching them during the 2-3 weeks, they wouldn't say they didn't actually mention anything. Whereas if that actually happened in an adults group, that could be a disaster.
Mhm.
That's it's just something
Yeah.
that came to my mind when you mentioned that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, well, my experience with the students, with teenagers, it's always been they get very clingy to the teacher they have, the teachers they have the first week. Very, very clingy. Sometimes, well, often they have to the second week they just get other teachers, and if they are there for 3 weeks, they change teachers again. And for whatever reason, probably is the style of the teachers, or perhaps some teachers they play games all the time, and then if they have to work on grammar they are not happy. Well, I don't know. I mean, but yet with grown-ups, with adults, it's okay. I mean, they, as long as you make them work, that's what they want. And you keep them happy, you are happy. They don't like miserable teachers or
Yeah.
serious teachers. They like a bit of entertainment, and they love psychology games.
Yes, absolutely.
Activities in which they, ooh, they have to think. I mean, they love thinking, which is good.
Yeah, and if you have access to different, like brain teasers, like you can also use them as fuelers.
Yes, yes, yeah. Brain teasers are excellent. I had one of the
And you
best
like,
results.
and whenever you have a look at these activities and you say, oh, I can make it into a gap fill, or I can make it into a brain teaser, or I can make it into something else. And like it's I met a friend the other day, and she said, like, I finally watched an interview where I didn't have to think about what I can do with it. My brain was a tease. Yeah. Very often we notice different things and we can use them in class all the time.